Right, so Mr. Palmer here, second video now. This one's about using JavaScript actually in practice. So you've got an idea how to include those files or JavaScript. And these are some ways of common ways of providing an output to the user using JavaScript. Okay, so the first way to do it is to use document.write. Literally, it's a method you pass. Has one parameter. In fact, you can pass in multiple parameters. And whatever argument you stick into it, that's what comes out directly in the document. It's not very elegant. Usually it's just used if you want to debug. Yeah, you can just start writing variables into the document and see what's going on in it. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly pull up some code. Where's my browser gone? Can anyone see Chrome anywhere? Here it is. Right, so here's an example of using document.write. Okay, so in my body I've got two paragraphs which you can see up here at the on the right hand side, opening paragraph and second paragraph. Then I've just literally got some JavaScript here in my page, and I've used document.write. This is the message. Document.write. This is another message. You can see the JavaScript is modifying the HTML page and literally writing the text directly into it. That's not that useful to me. Just so you can see, you can actually include HTML into the arguments that you're passing. Okay, so if I just save that and refresh it on the other side, you'll see that it's now included the JavaScript. Sorry, it's included the HTML tags. Okay, within the within what is writing to the page. Okay, now another way of sorry, here we go. So yeah, you can see that was what was happening before, and obviously by including HTML into it, it modified the output, right? So the another way of accessing of writing to the page is you can actually access an element via an identifier. So if you remember from your HTML and CSS, if you have a particular element, you can give it an ID, and then you can access that based on the identifier that you've given it. All right, so if we go back and we look at this, I've got another document over here, another file for demo, and you can see, all right, I've got paragraph, okay, called first. So I've given an identifier first, and I've got a paragraph here with an identifier called second, okay, and I've got two buttons. So my first button, this is the event handler I talked about earlier. So I've got my HTML element here, which is a button, and on the onClick event, I'm going to call function 1. And function 1, you can see here, this time the JavaScript is in the head. The reason for me putting in the head is I want it to be loaded earlier on. Okay, if I put it in my page after the button, I would have problems when I was trying to execute it, because when I click on the button, it's not going to know what the hell I'm talking about. Okay, so I've got my function over here. When I click on it, I'm going to use document.getElementById, and I've named it first, so I can literally pull up that element and I can start changing the properties of that element. So .innerHTML is a property of that paragraph. So different elements have different properties, and you can change the properties. So if you see when I run this page, if I click on button 1, it changes the first paragraph, or the paragraph that was has an ID of first, and it changes to say close now. Button 2 doesn't do anything because function 2 doesn't exist. But this is directly working with the property. You actually document.getElementById returns, okay, an object back. So if I make a separate function over here, sorry, I'm working in a rather odd position at the minute, so there are going to be a couple of typos probably. So I've got my function. What I can actually do is I'm going to make a variable called para. Okay, so para is going to be equal to document.getElementById first. All right, so that's document.getElementById is going to find first, return it, and I'm going to store it inside this object called para, because then basically I can say para.innerHTML is, I don't know, let's change it to a different message, also closed now. All right, so let's test that and see what happens. If I save that, let's refresh this page. Opening paragraph says closed now, and oops, need to change that one to second, isn't it? It's supposed to be the second paragraph. So refresh the page, and closes my first paragraph. This one also closes the second paragraph. Okay, so here directly working with the property of the element that's being returned, and this one is actually getting the returned element and storing it in an object and then using that object and changing properties of it later on. Okay, so two different ways of using .getElementById. All right, so that's a second way of outputting information on the page. Okay, and you can see the whole thing there. Here I've called it something slightly different. I've called it E in my function. When you put var in front of a variable name, okay, or a data structure, whatever it is, basically you're declaring it as a global in JavaScript. And you can see that here in function 2, I declared a global variable. So that means that later on, any other scripts that come after it, they will be able to access E as a global variable. All right. So the third way of outputting messages on the screen literally is an alert box. Okay, an alert literally just shows an alert. I'm sure I made one as a demo. Let's see if I actually did. Here I go, alert. Let's get that up. I'll open in Notepad++ and let's see what that is doing. Okay, so an alert box. Basically, this one's a bit more complicated. I'm sure I should have modified that before my demo, but never mind. Okay, so here we go. I got an alert. Okay, I got two buttons, function 1, function 2. All right, function 1 here is literally going to call B. Okay, and B, okay, has a parameter here X, and it's going to show what X is. Okay, I'm sure I had a more complex idea of what this demo was supposed to do, and for some reason I have no idea why I remember why. Okay, B. If when I call B, I put a value in here, you will see that whatever I pass B when I call it is going to be what's demonstrated on the screen. All right, so here we go. When I click say hi, it says hello. Now JavaScript, you can have multiple parameters for any for your function. So I can have multiple parameters in it. But what happens when you don't pass it anything? So basically, JavaScript will allow you to have a function with any number of parameters and pass it any number of parameters when you call it. So if I call B without actually sending it anything, you can see that it comes up and says, oops, I didn't refresh. Let's refresh this. And it actually comes up and says undefined. Okay, just to prove to you what I'm talking about. If I have A and X and I send B just only one parameter argument when I call it, all right, you will see that it comes up as undefined because my alert box is trying to show X, but X doesn't exist, it's undefined, right? So JavaScript has some odd behavior there, just for you to be aware of. Okay, and yeah, you can as you may probably have done before in function 2, I am using an array. Okay, so you can see here I've got a global array called stuff, which is storing 3 items of fruit, and I'm just getting the length of that array stuff, and I'm alerting that there are this many items. You can just concatenate strings as you would normally when you are using any other programming language. You can see JavaScript is loosely typed. It's not strict. Okay, you're not defining data types, and you're just creating variables on the fly when you just start using them. You're not having to declare them the way you do it in C or Java or C# or whatever the languages you're using. Okay, so there you go, 3 different ways of outputting messages to the user. Okay, you have document.getElementById, and then you had document.write, and you have alert boxes. Okay, so that should help you there with getting messages out to the user.